There were times where the truck would not physically stop, so we had to continue to drive and sort of steer into a skid. It was all very slow motion, but nonetheless, we were up probably 500 to 1,000 feet cliffside on some of these points, and it was terrifying. It was just terrifying.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your fearless host, Angie Scott.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, coming to you for the first time from the Lance Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio. If this is your first time finding the show, I'm so glad you did. If you've been listening for a while, thank you so much. I know we've got a few listeners who like to save up episodes so they can binge listen on their road adventures. And I'm honored, and I hope that you're enjoying the conversations and they help make the time fly by for you when you're on the road. As I mentioned last week, I'm excited to finally be in the Lance Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio. You may have noticed the updated cover artwork for the show. So this is something I've been working on for a while, and it's finally all coming together. In fact, as you're listening to this, we're in the truck headed to Florida, to the Harris chain of lakes, and staying at a state park for a couple nights, then heading over to Stuart, Florida, for the Stuart Boat Show. So this is our first time actually hitting the road with the truck and camper and staying in it. So this whole experience is sort of a trial by fire, not by design. It's just the way things happen to work out timing wise. So praying everything goes smoothly for our first journey into truck camper life. But I'm sure there will be plenty of learning experiences along the way. I'll be doing some filming and putting together some video for you of the adventure on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to by going to podcast.thewomanangler.com/YouTube. I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe so you'll be notified when new videos are posted. Now on to this week's episode. My guest, very fittingly, did an epic road trip in a Lance truck camper back in 2019. They put nearly 15,000 miles on the truck in the span of 6 months, traveling from California all the way up to the Arctic Circle and into Alaska. They documented the whole thing, and you can watch their journey on Amazon Prime and on their YouTube channel, which I'll put links to in the show notes for this episode, thewomanangler.com/166. They're known as Mortons on the Move, Tom and Caitlin Morton, and I'm super excited for you to hear our conversation about that epic journey, which included some fishing, so we talk about that too. And you know how amazing fishing can be in Alaska. So sit back and enjoy this week's episode from the new Lance Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio. Welcome to the show, Mortons on the Move. Tom and Caitlin Morton, welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. You've been full-time RVers since 2015, I read, and a couple television shows, The RVers, and most recently, Mortons on the Move, Go North. That's on Amazon Prime and YouTube. And just welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having us, Ann.
So I wanted to start off by asking, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but what led you to deciding to go full-time as RVers?
Oh, it's kind of a long story, but the short answer is basically weather. We were living in Michigan, and we were really sick of the winter. We spent some time in Florida, and when we flew home one time, we landed in a blizzard, and we drove home in a blizzard to a spot that we didn't really want to be anymore. And on our way home, we were like, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way we could take a house south in the winter? And we drove by an RV dealership, and we kind of turned to Caitlin, and I said, aren't those like homes on wheels? And by the time we had made the drive home, we decided that we were going to move into one of those RV things that we knew nothing about and go south.
Nice.
A year and a half later, we did it.
Well, I think a lot of people have that same kind of fantasy. I know I have for a while because I'm actually from Minnesota originally. And so I know all about not wanting to be up there in the wintertime. But when I moved to Nashville, it's still too cold for me here in the winter. So I want to go even further south. So I've been fantasizing about that for a long time. And I think just a lot of people never really get the courage, I guess, to take the plunge. You started off then, so you had to downsize your house going to a fifth wheel. And then we'll talk about the truck camper adventure, which is even more downsizing to do something like that. Was it a hard process, like getting rid of your stuff?
Yeah, it definitely was. We actually started off in the largest RV that we could possibly get. We got ourselves a big toy hauler. We had a motorcycle, and I flew-powered paramotor, so I had a whole bunch of flying gear. We brought everything that we possibly could, but we just realized that it was so big that it was going to limit us so much in where we could go and what we could do. So then we downsized it again into a 35-foot fifth wheel. And at that point, we were starting to kind of get the hang down. But the initial downsizing from the house, it was challenging. It definitely was.
I can kind of relate to that because when I went from a house to a houseboat, I thought I was going to have to, I've seen those shows where people move into tiny houses and they're, getting rid of all their things. And I pretty much thought that that's what I was going to have to do. But I was kind of surprised the houseboat actually has a lot of storage, a lot more than a travel trailer or fifth wheel, because the whole hull of the boat is open pretty much. And so I was able to store a bunch of stuff down there, and it's 66 feet. So it's, quite a bit larger. And it ended up not being as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's bigger than a lot of people's apartments.
Yeah.
I think one thing that people don't realize with RVs is it's not always just the storage space, but it's the weight capacity.
Right.
A lot of times you'll end up packing everything in. And in our first fifth wheel, our toy hauler, it had a giant garage and is designed to carry motorcycles and different things. But
we filled it up.
But it turned out that pretty much the weight of the motorcycle put it at its limit. So anything else we put in it maxed it out, and it was a real challenge for us. It was having to downsize yet again was really to make that weight requirement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I've been thinking about as we're preparing to go the truck camper route. Is, the payload of the truck and making sure that it can handle the weight of the camper. And I went with the 855S, which is designed for short bed trucks. And so it was they don't really make short bed dualies. Dodge has a mega cab, but from what I understand, the center of gravity is off for the camper on those. And so we ended up going with the single rear wheel Ford F350, which should be fine, but dually would have been made me feel a little bit better anyways. But we don't plan on doing any kind of off-roading like you guys did.
You'll be surprised, actually.
Wait. So let's get into that a little bit. I mentioned before we started recording that not too long ago I had an angler on the show. Well, her husband fishes the Bassmaster Elite Tour, and she rides with him and she fishes as well, and their dog, and they lived in a Lance truck camper for 4 years. It's Carl and Kayla Jochimson. Yeah. And full time for 4 years. And I was just so amazed. And I remember, truck campers when I was a kid, and we borrowed one a few times as a family and took, little camping trips. And, I'm like, how could you live in a truck camper for 4 years? And I started researching, and I'm like, whoa, they have come a really long way since I was a kid.
Yes, they have.
I mean, slide outs and full, shower and toilet and all the things that you need. And then the other part that surprised me was that you're able to lift the camper right off your truck, and then you can, drive around without having to haul the camper everywhere you go. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was really what sold us on the whole idea of a truck camper. Especially for going to Alaska, which was something that we really wanted to do. We always envisioned doing it in a truck camper for that very reason. Being able to have the four-wheel drive capability and high clearance of the truck, and then also be able to drop the RV to be able to go out even further and do more exploration without that extra payload on the back. That just seemed like the best of both worlds for us.
And it really kind of blends that line of like a drivable motorhome and a towable, because you kind of have the flexibility of both, being able to drop it and the ease of driving the smaller vehicle. So the truck camper, it really seems to make sense, especially if you want to tow something else, tow a boat or anything else. The payload behind a truck is typically higher than that of like a van or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I ultimately decided to go the truck camper route, is because I'll be fishing the Women's Pro Bass Tour and pulling a boat. And the idea of trying to pull two trailers just does not sound like a good idea at all. I actually know I know somebody who has a fifth wheel and pulls his boat behind it. And I don't know how he does it. I don't even know if it's legal in all the
it depends
states.
on the state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually have some experience with that. We towed our boat. We towed our boat behind our fifth wheel once, and while it does work quite well, and it's not bad to drive it on the highway or anything. It's that, like, getting into a campground or maneuvering it or something, you always have to disconnect. You can't back up at all. There's a lot of limitations with that.
Wow. Yeah. I'm envisioning, because I just finished watching your series, the Go North series, envisioning trying to do something like that in some of those places you went. It would be impossible.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know you guys did a lot of boondocking on your trip. Matter of fact, how often did you even stay in an actual campground or resort?
I did the calculations. It was very, very few. I want to say over the 6 months, probably 80% of that was boondocking and not in a campground. We would stay in campgrounds occasionally. Sometimes there just wasn't, great boondocking opportunities close to where we wanted to go. But usually where we wanted to go was off the beaten track. And so there's so much wild area up in northern Canada and Alaska that it really is an awesome place to go boondocking if you're comfortable and equipped to do that.
Mm-hmm. Explain to our listeners who might not be familiar what boondocking is exactly.
Yeah, boondocking is just camping without hookups, and a lot of times it's done in a place that's not always just not designated for camping. Sometimes it's just on public lands. It could even be on a beach. It could be on a riverbank. It could really be anywhere that you can legally stay overnight. And you don't have water, you don't have electric, so you rely on the functionality of your setup. A lot of times it's a camper that has water tanks, has sewer holding tanks, has
batteries, or maybe some solar panels or a generator to provide your power.
So you get to still have all the comforts of home, even when you're completely disconnected from the utilities.
Yeah, and you guys had a pretty nice setup with the camper that you took up to Alaska, with some of those extra amenities that made boondocking a lot easier, basically. Talk a little bit about some of those extra things you had on that truck camper.
Yeah, so for our trip to Alaska, we took a Lance 1172 truck camper, which is their flagship model. It's got 2 slides on it, so very spacious and enough room for the 2 of us and our 2 dogs for a 6-month trip. And that was on a F350 dual rear wheel truck. And we had that outfitted with lithium batteries from Battleborn Batteries. Tom's an electrical engineer, so he's really into the electrical side of things and the power side of things. So we wanted to have a pretty robust electrical system. We were filming and doing a lot of editing. We were using a lot of power, and we didn't want to be running our generator all the time.
We didn't even have a generator.
Yeah, we didn't even have. We had Lance build the truck camper out without a generator, so that we'd have space for the batteries and the inverter and stuff like that. So we would have silent power wherever we wanted to go.
We outfitted the truck. We used the second alternator off the truck as the primary charging means for the RV, but we also did have 200 watts of solar on the roof, which when you're up in Alaska where the sun shines 24/7, it actually helps out quite a bit. So the solar is an incredible way to add a little bit of extra power for your electrical needs while off grid. And most people aren't running video editing computers and cameras all the time. So we were pretty power hungry. But in addition to that, we also, the camper had pretty good water supply. Looking at how much water you can have on board is always important when you want to stay off grid. And that's a lot of times a limiting factor is how much water that you have. So
then also your tank capacity. So so not only your fresh water to take drinking water and, water to shower and wash dishes and stuff, but then the wastewater, which you want to be responsible with and dump in a sanitation station. So the Lance 1172 had quite a bit, so that we had plenty of capacity to go off grid for several days before needing to find water to fill up or a place to dump our tanks.
We could comfortably do about a week in that camper.
Nice. That's awesome. I've been doing some research on boondocking because I've realized that, I'm still trying to get all the pieces and parts together to be able to hit the road. And most of the resorts where I'm wanting to go are already pretty well booked up. And so I'm trying to find alternate solutions. And there's boondocking specific websites where people have, offered up a place to park for a night or two, and you can find these places. And so that might be something we look at doing. But the other piece of it is, and maybe you guys know the reason for this because I'm not 100% sure, but some campgrounds don't allow truck campers. Do you happen to know why that would be?
We don't really have an idea as to why that might be, but we have seen that before. We've never seen one that disallows truck campers altogether, but we have seen campgrounds that disallow dropping the truck camper. And I don't know why that is. Any of the campgrounds we stayed in didn't care, so we dropped it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, people have a preconceived notion of truck campers just from back in the day or something, but I mean, these, like the Lance ones and some other brands, they're really, really luxurious.
Yeah. I remember the first time we went into the 1172, we stepped in and we were like, wait a minute, this is a truck camper? Yeah. Where am I?
There were multiple times on our trip where we would be kind of looking out at these beautiful vistas where we got to, and we just kind of have this realization that, wow, I'm standing in the back of a truck bed. I'm showering in the back of a truck bed. It's just it's sort of strange how comfortable you can be living in the back of a truck bed.
Yeah, like you said before, Angie, they're not the truck campers of the olden days anymore. They've got all the bells and whistles.
Yep. Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments of the series when you had your first showers in the truck camper and you're like, what in the world? Pretty awesome.
It's an interesting feeling. We took ours all the way to the edge of the north, as far as you could go, camped on the Arctic Ocean, and just kind of having all the amenities to be comfortable while somewhere that remote was, it's a neat feeling. It's really neat to just be able to be comfortable anywhere that you go.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on a few of my favorite moments from the series. You mentioned getting to the Arctic Ocean. That was one of them. What was that feeling like when you finally made it that far?
Well, the Arctic Ocean was really a climactic moment of our trip. So for people who aren't familiar with the Go North trip that we did in the series, it basically documents our 6-month journey, 15,000 miles in that 1172 truck camper where we drove from Southern California all the way up through Canada, all the way to Alaska, and then up the Dempster Highway in the Yukon and Northwest Territories to the hamlet of Tuktoyaktuk. It used to just go to the town of Inuvik in Northwest Territories, and then you would have to get on a plane or a boat to get out to the Arctic Ocean. But in, I believe, 2017 or 2018, they finished the road from Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk, so you can actually drive all the way to the Arctic Ocean now. You used to only be able to do it on the Dalton Highway in Alaska, but with this new road, that was something that we really wanted to do, and part of the reason why we went with the truck camper, to be able to drive that 500 miles of gravel road of the Dempster Highway, and that was a huge part of our trip. And when we finally got there, I mean, getting there was monumental, but the whole journey through that 500 miles of the Dempster Highway was incredible. You're driving through the most remote areas that we've ever been in, and going through mountains that you just feel like you're one of very few people who've seen them, and very untouched wilderness and the tundra. And then so when we finally got there, we really, it was really cool to be standing on the edge of the Arctic Ocean and think, wow, we made it. This was awesome.
And you actually went in for a bit. It's crazy.
Yeah, you can't go to the edge of the Arctic Ocean and not jump in. I
think I get hypothermia.
Yeah. It was neat to see other travelers there too, and just kind of get to share that experience with others, but then also to see the community, because we were some of the first people that were able to drive up there to this little town and kind of see a community that had never had a road before until just recently, and speak with these individuals. And
and understand, the decision that they had to make of whether that road should go in or not, because they knew that it would mean more people coming to the area. Some positive things would definitely come, but they also realized that some negative things would come with that kind of exposure. And the Inuvialuit people really wanted to, preserve their culture and their heritage, and they didn't want that to be compromised by the road. But in talking with them, they all kind of seemed to realize that, they had to move forward, and they wanted to have, better economic opportunities. They wanted to have better opportunities for their children. And so they still were very focused on preserving their culture and cautiously accepting new travelers coming to the area.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see. That was a great episode, and I hope listeners will go and watch this series, because it is so educational too. Just watching your adventures, but then also learning about all these different areas that I've never been or even heard of a lot of them. So one of my other favorite moments, it was actually made me incredibly nervous. I can't remember what part of the journey exactly where you were, but it was when you were on one of them dirt roads, winding the mountains, and I guess the weather hadn't been great or something, and the road wasn't in the best condition, and you actually had to, you could feel the truck kind of starting to slide toward the edge. I can't imagine what that would have been like.
That was definitely the most frightening part of the entire journey. And we didn't document it real well because I think
you were kind of preoccupied.
So we were a little preoccupied, but we ended up taking a road that we knew was going to be a challenge. But and we had been warned that the road is basically impassable in wet weather.
And this is the Canole Road in the Yukon, also known as Yukon Highway 6.
It was a road that was built for a pipeline that was put in back in the 50s, I think, and it was removed thereafter, but the road was kind of sort of kept up by the
it's a seasonal road for recreation and stuff.
Very, very remote, and it connected two parts of our journey that we wanted to take, and we were told that it was not great in wet weather, but it hadn't been wet. It had been completely dry. But of course, when we ended up out there hundreds of miles from anything, it started to rain on us, and we immediately found out what they meant by that. The road was basically a clay-like base, and the clay stuck to the tires of the truck and just removed almost all traction. And one thing that is challenging with a truck camper is that additional weight, and not only will it sink you into mud, but just managing that extra weight can be a little bit more challenging, and it's going to, say, drag the truck down a hill a lot faster. So we were in four-wheel drive low, moving as slow as possible, but there were times where the truck would not physically stop. So we had to continue to drive and sort of steer into a skid. It was all very slow motion, but nonetheless, we were up probably 500 to 1,000 feet cliffside on some of these points, and it was terrifying. Terrifying.
It sounds like it. I'm getting nervous now just listening to you describe that.
Well, you're from Minnesota. You know what it's like driving on ice. It's kind of almost counterintuitive what you have to do to correct when you're on ice and starting to slip. And it was very much like that. It's like you just kind of keep going. You don't press the brakes because that's not going to help any situation. So even if you're sliding, you got to kind of keep on the gas. And you got to kind of turn into it so that you're not breaking the traction on the front wheels. So yeah, it's
let me slow down.
You're like, I
can't. Or kind of going sideways down the hill. It's just terrifying. But we had put ourselves in that scenario. We I think that this is a scenario that very, very few people will ever find themselves in.
Well,
but
we might have been more scared than the danger we were actually in. I mean, we weren't moving very fast. If we had, run into a little bit of a berm or something, we probably would have stopped and been fine. But it was very frightening in the moment.
Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah. I hope I never find myself in that situation. That's all I can say. I went on a church, like a youth group trip to the Rocky Mountains one time, and we had kind of a younger youth leader driving the big church van, and we were winding, and I'd look out the window and it was just straight down, and the conditions were fine. I was terrified even then in that situation.
Yeah.
You
okay.
don't want to be afraid of heights when you're driving up mountains.
No. So, of course, the other big highlight was the whole porcupine encounter. That was fun to watch, but man, I wouldn't want to be in that situation either.
Ironically, that happened just before the terrifying road incident. So that was a very stressful.
The whole road was very eventful for us. It was, at the beginning of our journey. So fortunately, the rest of it went pretty smoothly and got kind of the scary parts out of the way.
It was a stressful couple of days. But what happened was we had awoke we hadn't awoke. We were just going to bed. The light in Alaska in the north stays up so long. It was about 1 a.m, and there was still some light out. We heard this noise under the truck. And when I went out to investigate, we thought maybe
a scratching and a squeaking
and a bear or something. And it turned out that we had a full-size porcupine up under the truck chewing on all of the wiring. Yeah. And it took almost about 2 hours to get.
The first time, I'm spoiling it, but it only took maybe about half an hour. And he came down and we chased him into the woods. And then we walked back to the truck, and we were just about to go back inside the truck camper, and we heard the noise again. And we were like, wait a minute, he couldn't have gotten back in there that fast. And we looked underneath the truck, and there was a second porcupine under there. same spot. We were like, what? There were 2 porcupines under our truck, just like having a party.
And we had to pry them out with sticks.
That one wasn't as willing to vacate.
They would not leave underneath the truck, and
that took hours.
A lot of people have suggested bear spray or different things, but we think that pretty much anything we would have done. I think it was scared and it was trying to hide under there, but it kept chewing on stuff, and we finally got rid of them. And they immediately tried to come back. Even after we beat on these things, they kept trying to come back. So we packed up and we left. It was about 3 a.m. at this point, and we left our campsite and we got going down the road. And as we almost expected it, I couldn't climb under the truck at the place we were at because there were quills all over the ground. It was just a bed of needles. So we had to move anyway so I could get under there and see what they'd done. And immediately after we started driving, the truck started throwing error codes up on the dash. And we were hundreds of miles from anything on this remote road at this point. So we had to pull up the road, and we didn't want to go far. I have some knowledge and understanding of these modern vehicles, and I was pretty sure that what they had damaged was the diesel particulate filter, which traps the soot and helps clean up these diesel engines these days. And if that's not operating properly or the truck can't communicate with it, what'll happen is that filter will clog up and it will actually prevent the engine from running properly or kill it altogether. So we knew that we didn't
want that to happen
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's all a matter of time with that filter, how long it has before it clogs up. So we didn't go very far, and luckily I have some electrical experience as well. So the next morning we were able to get under there and figure out all the wires that had been chewed and rewire the underside of the truck out in the middle of nowhere. And it's a problem.
That's the last time I teased Tom for bringing a soldering iron on a trip.
Well, and I when I watched that episode, I wondered, if it was anybody else who didn't have that experience and the truck became undrivable, what would you do in that situation? Is it just going to cost thousands of dollars for a 100-200 mile tow, or like how does that work?
That's a good question. I think that in a place like that, in the real remote wilds, a lot of times people are willing to go out of their way to try to help someone. And there was very little traffic on this road. The most traffic we saw were actually adventure motorcycles, people going by, which wouldn't have been much help at all to us. But there was one local that we saw that was out there fishing, actually, on Quiet Lake. They had this entire lake to themselves. And I think that, you'd end up having to get a ride into town with one of them and find somebody that would be willing to, drag you out of there.
I think what was really interesting about traveling in those remote areas of northern Canada and Alaska was, I think we went into it thinking we were going to be so alone. And while it was very remote and there wasn't a lot of traffic, there was traffic. There were other people out there. And so, and they also have a culture of helping each other out because, unlike, down here in the 48 where you pretty much have self-service, most places, you don't have that up there. And so, those times in the olden days before cell phones where people would stop on the side of the road and make sure you were okay if you were pulled over, that's still very alive and well in those communities. So there were many times where we had, just pull over to the side of the road to grab a snack or something, and people would stop to make sure that we were okay. So even though we were out there on Knoll Road, it probably would have only been several, at max several hours before somebody came.
Maybe days.
No, we saw somebody every day, but I feel very confident that somebody would have gone by and would have been able to help us. So even though it again seemed like a very dangerous situation, help would have come, and we would have figured a way out of it. So I think that's one of the things that scares people about traveling in those types of places is the lack of service and the unknown. But when we were there really was a community sense that people wanted to take care of each other.
That's awesome. That's good to know and good to hear. So, bunch of highlights. I'm going to touch on a couple more. I highly, again, recommend people watch the series because there's so many great moments and things that you guys got to experience along the way. One of the things, because this is the Woman Angler and Adventure, I did want to talk about your salmon fishing experience in Alaska. Wow. 23 salmon and 23 rockfish. And how long were you even out there?
We were out for maybe about 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
Wasn't even that long. About 2 or 3.
Yeah.
It was pretty incredible.
When you have somebody who knows what they're doing and you go to a place like Alaska where there's a lot of fish, like, man, you could have a really great day.
The salmon were jumping in the boat, and near the end of our time, we were about to head back. Our guide was asked, "Do you want to go for some rockfish?" And we were like, "Well, will we actually catch any?" He's like, "Well, we'll find out." We kind of boated over to a reef and we dropped the lines down. And before the weight even hit the bottom, it was like, wham! You had one of these suckers. It was incredible. And we still a year and a half later have some salmon in the freezer.
Nice. It looked like the rockfish were put up pretty good fights.
They did at depth, but because they were non-pelagic fish down on the bottom, they after you brought them up probably 30 to 40 feet, their air bladders would expand and the fight was kind of gone. But yeah, they were a lot of fun.
I think the silvers were pretty fun.
The silvers put up the most fight. Yeah,
I would say.
And then the fish hatchery that you went to, that had to be a pretty crazy sight to see.
Yeah. So these fish hatcheries in Alaska, it kind of plays right into the salmon's natural tendency to return to where they were spawned. So, or where they were born to spawn. So all of these fish are kind of running up to the hatchery. And if you go to visit it, it's just like a blanket of fish trying to climb up these fish ladders. And, there's seagulls. And if you time it right, you might even see bears, just kind of at the buffet line there, just eating all the fish.
Millions and millions of pink salmon.
Yeah, it's quite a sight to see. And, coming from, I grew up in Michigan, and where great day fishing is maybe you get a bite, and,
Yep.
and so to go up there, and that was the very first time I'd ever been salmon fishing. Tom had spent several years of his childhood in Alaska salmon fishing with his dad, so he kind of knew what to expect, but I was just like, whoa, I've never caught this many fish. I've never caught this big of fish. Like, it was really exciting.
It looked like a blast. It looked a little chilly, but still fun.
It was actually a pretty great day in Valdez. They were having a pretty warm summer, so I guess there's nothing we can complain about.
We told us to expect rain, and we didn't have any, so it wasn't too bad.
It was a great day fishing.
There you go. And then one last thing I wanted to touch on, because I think this is something on so many people's bucket lists, but you got to see the Northern Lights, and that had to be a pretty incredible experience.
Yeah, most people don't realize that the Northern Lights are almost always visible up there as long as it's dark. That's the challenge, is that in the summer, when most people want to visit, the sun shines almost 24/7.
You can't see the Northern Lights going on.
We stayed long enough into September when it was starting to get dark, and we made another trip north just to hopefully see the Northern Lights. And when we got up past Fairbanks, up near the Arctic Circle once again in September, they are as incredible as the photos make them out to be. The sky was just aglow, and it's like definitely worth getting to glimpse them if you ever get the opportunity, because they are just stunning.
I remember growing up in Minnesota, getting a little bit of a glimpse of them sometimes on just the perfect night where the conditions were just right, but nothing like that. So that would be amazing.
Yeah, in Michigan, we would see them to the north a lot of times, just kind of glow on the horizon. But when you get up there, you can look straight up
they're
through
right
them.
Above you.
Wow.
It's really incredible. And you see different colors. We saw some red and like a little bit of purple, and they're so vibrant. And, I think a lot of people think maybe, to get those fancy pictures, you need to do long exposures. You need to touch it up in Photoshop or something. But when you're in the right spot, and Fairbanks, Alaska is one of the best places to see it, or north of the Arctic Circle, that's even more ideal. They look just like in the pictures. It's stunning.
Awesome. Well, what's 2020 been like for you? Because I know obviously it's been hugely challenging for a lot of people, especially people that do a lot of traveling. Were you still able to get some adventures in this year?
Well, we were, long story short, but so we did the Go North trip in 2019 and put on over 15,000 miles, pretty intense traveling. So we were already planning to spend a little bit of downtime in 2020, kind of not moving around as much. And we spent quite a bit of time in Florida in one place, and then in Michigan in one place, both visiting or being with family. And that just really worked out for this year and the events of this year, kind of not moving as much, being in familiar places. I think especially full-time RVers kind of felt a little displaced in 2020 because, a lot of campgrounds closed at the start of the pandemic. People were very uncertain of where they could go and stay and reliably get what they needed to get during the pandemic. I think now it's gotten a little bit more, I guess, not as unknown. People are starting to figure it out, but I think a lot of people are turning to RVs as a way to travel and still isolate. So instead of going to a hotel room, you have your hotel room on your back with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we frequently we'll stop at a rest stop, but we'll use our RV and our bathroom and such. But we did get one big adventure in this year. At the very start of the pandemic, we were actually RVing in New Zealand, and it was a bit of a wild ride navigating the start of the pandemic in a foreign country. But it was a pretty wild experience, and that is our next web series coming out very soon. Is some travels in New Zealand. That'll be available on our YouTube channel initially.
Awesome. We'll be looking forward to seeing that. You also are on another show called The RVers, and that's been now on Destination America, right?
Yeah. So the RVers, we're actually shooting season 3. Seasons 1 and 2 have aired, and they air on the Discovery Channel, PBS stations, and Fun Roads TV, Destination America, which is a Discovery Channel channel. Just I think actually it's still running season 1 rerun right now.
Yeah.
I think that's Sundays at 8:30. I'll have to double check that. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, we've been a part of that since the beginning, and it's pretty great. We're co-hosts with John and Peter of the RV Geeks and the show's creator Anthony Nally, and we cover all things RVs. So if you're thinking about RVing, tune into that show because it's very educational, and we cover a wide range of topics.
Awesome. I'll be checking that out as well. And then your website, mortonsonthemove.com, that's also really, really informative. Lots of really great information and articles on there. I was just kind of digging through some of it. I was kind of going down a rabbit hole before our call today, reading some articles and stuff. And I'm like, man, I need to spend some more time on here and get some more information before we go on our journey. So
yeah, we try to share some learnings that we've had with 5 years experience on the road. We've learned quite a bit. We've learned quite a bit about RVs, the mechanics of RVs, and just how to travel. And we're just sharing that as we get to it, as we want to write and share videos all about it.
Yeah, lots of really great tips and things I didn't even think about. And then your YouTube channel, you mentioned as well, your series on there. I was watching the video about how to unload the truck camper, and that was very informative. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to like back in that really narrow space and make sure you got everything set right and you're not hitting anything. But that was a really good video. So I'll probably watch that a couple more times before we actually do it.
Yeah. So we did not only the 20 episodes of the Go North travels where we were using the RV or the truck camper, but we wanted to make some videos around some of the things that we we had questions about when we started using the truck camper, because before the Go North expedition and partnering with Lance, we had not used a truck camper before. So loading and unloading was completely new to us. And we were in exactly your shoes, Angie. Was just like, how does this work? Like, I've got the general idea, but I'd really like to see somebody do this before I try it. Mm-hmm. So that's what we really try to do, is like help answer the questions that we had when we were starting out, and help people feel comfortable RVing and getting into RVing.
Truck campers are kind of a unique breed. Yeah, there's definitely some learnings, just kind of the mechanics of it. And since you really are in control of it, you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, great. Well, I will share the links to all those resources to your website and YouTube. And also people can follow you on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm going to check out the RVers as well. And I just really appreciate you guys coming on the show. And hopefully some people who are interested in this lifestyle might think about taking the plunge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, it was great to chat with you as well. Yeah. And we're excited for you to get to experience the truck camper lifestyle as well.
Yeah. All right, that wraps up this week's episode. Are you ready to take the plunge and experience truck camper living? Well, don't forget to check out the links in the show notes for the various resources mentioned, and watch Morton's on the Move Go North series, and subscribe to their YouTube channel and the Woman Angler and Adventure YouTube channels for more truck camper adventure videos. From the Lance Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio, I'm signing off, and we'll see you next week.